Hello, Bruce Porter again here. We're still continuing on with the last days in the book of Revelation. We talked about the different elements that I had put together in a book called The Last Days in the Book of Revelation. We've gone through 1 through 5, the mission of John, the war in heaven, the woman and the child, the church and the kingdom, the apostasy and the woman hidden, and the restoration of the church called out of the wilderness. Today we're going to go through some from about number 8. And that's going to be Satan's influence over the nations of the earth, Babylon the Great, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. The sixth seal is opened, the sealing of the 144,000. The seventh seal is opened, the nature in commotion. Number 13, wars and plagues. 14, the patience of the saints. And 14a, the prepared righteous need not fear. So these are the ones that we're going to go over today and discuss a little bit. Now keep in mind and remember this, I put together this book for missionaries, The Last Days in the Book of Revelation, and it's just mostly scripture, and it's going to have a lot more information in it than I'm going to be able to give you, and it's just a product of personal study and was never intended for publication. It was never edited, it was never corrected. It's just simple research and scriptural research. And it's really based on understanding that the scriptures are the best commentary on the scriptures. And it's dealing with the last days, beginning with the opening of the sixth seal, at which we're in. So you can get this book, this Last Days and the Book of Revelation, or the event list, just the 30 plus events of the last days and all the scriptures that pertain to them. You can download it for free at bhporter.net, and then you go under research and then Porter Pages, and you'll be able to find it there. Or you can go to the BH Porter app, and you should be able to have it on your phone or your iPad or even your computer if you want to do that. And you can get that app. So number 8 is Satan's influence over the nations of the earth. So number 8, we read in Revelations 13. You could actually read this whole chapter, but I'm just only going to take portions out of it. But in verses 1 through 3, it states, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him power." And I think that's important. The dragon gave him power, and his seat and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and this deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. It goes on in verses 4 through 9. "And they worshiped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast." Now, it's not the beast they're worshiping. It says they worship the dragon. Now, Joseph Smith says the dragon is Satan. They worship the dragon, which gave power to the beast, and they worship the beast, saying, "Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things. Blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months." Now, I think it's important to keep that 42 months because that's the same amount of time that the woman fled into the wilderness with her child that we talked about last time. The gospel goes into protection during an apostasy, and it's giving the same length of time, which this may be a direct connection to that apostasy, because it's using the same time. 42 months is 1260. Then verse 6, "He opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them. And power was given to him over all kindreds and tongues and nations." Now, if you understand the concept of the Holy Roman Empire and what was being said about the woman and the child, then this all seems to fit there. And in verse 8, and all that dwell on the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. And if any man have an ear, let him hear." So who are they going to worship? It says in verse 4, they worship the dragon which gave power to the beast. Now many might say that the beast are the nations of that were controlled during that apostasy, during that time of apostasy. Well, number 9, Babylon the Great, which reigneth over the kings of the earth, is in chapter is number 9 and 17, 1 through 18. Babylon, there's some interesting things about Babylon. Babylon, all of world history, to begin with, all of world history is nothing more than the details between the battle that rages between Babylon and Zion. All of world history, from Adam down to the present time, all our current events, everything that's going on, our political philosophies that are out there, education, everything falls into this battle that's raging between Satan trying to establish Babylon and God trying to establish Zion through his prophets and his apostles. Well, each one of them have a motive, a justification, a method, a virtue, a power, and knowledge. The motive of Babylon is always personal gain. It's always comes down to money. What's in it for me? What do I get? With God, it's always consecration. It's sharing that which you have for the upbuilding of the kingdom and the establishment of Zion, which is always given in connection with the law of the gospel and the law of sacrifice, which is the sustaining and defending of the kingdom, and the law of the gospel, which is taking care of the poor and the needy, which is contrary to that of Babylon. Everything in Babylon is for personal gain. The justification for Babylon is always competition. It's the survival of the fittest. A man prospers according to his own genius, to use Korihor's words. But with Zion, it's always love and charity. And with consecration and the justification of that love in Zion is charity, the pure love of Christ. The method that Satan uses, or that Babylon uses, is always violence, riots, demonstrations, terrorism, trying to force people into submission to their will. Where in Zion, it's always, and with God, it's always the upheavals of nature, because you have no one to blame when there's an earthquake or a tornado or a hurricane, something like that. There's no one to blame but God. We even call them acts of God or acts of nature. And so Satan always uses violence, the violence of man. There's always someone to point the finger at. But with God, it's the upheavals of nature. Now, today we're trying to argue our way out of the upheavals of nature and say, well, it's because of man. We have climate change. We have global warming, whatever you want to call it. We're trying to blame that on mankind rather than on what's happening in order to turn the hearts of man back towards God. Well, the virtue of Babylon is always the denial of guilt. There is no virtue. It's not me. It's somebody else. It's somebody else's fault. It's not my problem. I didn't do it, and I take no responsibility for it. You're always blaming somebody else. With God and Zion, it's always repentance, trying to change yourself, trying to become better than what you were before. The power that Babylon uses is always compulsion. There's two kinds of power in Scripture, especially in the Book of Mormon. It's military and missionary, or compulsion and conversion. And Satan always tries to force his will by compulsion, turning, as we see in the United States today and many different countries around the world. When sins become civil rights, then people are compelled to accept the morals and values of the government or of those people, and that's the way Satan likes to work, is compulsion and military, where God and Zion is always conversion. It's always missionary. It's using your agency and choice that God has given to all mankind. And when sins become civil rights, when scriptural sins become civil rights, then the freedom of religion is lost. Well, how does Babylon do this when it comes to understanding and knowledge? It's deception and the control of knowledge. It's spin. He tries to control. You control the masses by controlling the amount of information they get. And if you can get people to believe a lie, then that's how you end up controlling them. But with Zion and God, you're always seeking for further light and truth. And that's what the goal is. So with Babylon, there's personal gain, competition, violence, the denial of guilt, compulsion, and then deception and control of knowledge. But with Zion, it's consecration, charity, the upheavals of nature, changing character through your repentance, always with agency and choice as you seek for further light and truth. So these are the two forces that are always there. Well, the book of Revelation and the seven seals, now we're getting into that sixth seal. The prophet, as we mentioned before, the prophet Joseph Smith revealed in the Doctrine and Covenants that there's, of those seven seals, the first seal contains the things of the first 1,000 years, and the second of the second 1,000 years, and so on to the seventh. Because that means that everything, the first through the fifth, are really history from our point of view. And that's why I kind of begin the discussion of the last days. There's some preliminary and foundational things that are discussed in the book of Revelation. But when the sixth seal is opened is really our day. That's when things happen. The interpolation of this would assume that the time period in which we now live is the sixth seal. This may or may not be correct, and everybody's going to have a different opinion, and that's all right. Nobody should believe me. However, chapter 6, verse 12, with the opening of the sixth seal, will be the beginning point of the events of the last days. And as I mentioned, there will be some preliminary things that are often discussed within this. With the opening of the seal, there are seen signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth, signaling that the end is nigh at hand. There is none to escape, says the scriptures, not even kings, presidents, or rich men of the earth. It is at this time that the mighty learn that God is no respecter of persons, and no such thing as blue blood, and that the Lord esteemeth all flesh as one. He is righteous. Only he that is righteous is favored of God. We learn there in 1 Nephi chapter 17. Well, this begins with the great earthquake. Now, there are a few people that try and explain, well, the sixth seal happened 1,000 years ago, but the events, in my opinion, the events of the sixth seal haven't happened yet. And it begins with the great earthquake. And we see this in Revelation chapter 6, verses 12 and 13. I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became blood, and the stars of heaven fell to the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. Now these things have not happened. They would have been recognized, and these events are global. They're not going to be sequestered away in some foreign country that nobody that's non-Christian that nobody knows about. These things are going to be global. These things are going to be seen, and it's going to be a great earthquake. The sun becomes darkened, the moon becomes as blood, and the stars of heaven fall. And this event, the earthquake, and the sun and the moon and the stars are talked about in every one of our standard works. This sign is given in all of our standard works because it is in our time. It's going to happen in our time. Verse 14 of chapter 6 says, and the heaven departed as a scroll when it's rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their place. This is expanding on the great earthquake that this particular chapter began with there in verse 12. And the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man hid themselves in the dens of the rocks of the mountains. So the destructions that come are going to be scaring and making the people afraid, scaring the people, making them afraid of things, wanting them to hide. We see this as there's great destructions that took place at the time of Enoch. There in the book of Moses, as we read there in the Enoch chapters, which are chapter 6 and chapter 7 of the book of Moses, and it even continues into chapter 8 with the flood and Noah. But the earthquakes that were going on and taking place were causing even the animals, not just the men and the people to hide and cry, but the animals to cry because of the great earthquakes and waves heaving beyond their bounds, and islands coming up and parts of the earth sinking, that there was massive cataclysmic events that were taking place. We see this even carrying on from Enoch into Noah and to the flood. We see it even after the flood when the Tower of Babel is being built and the great winds that come. And we see this, we recognize this as coming or is being talked about in the book of Ether. The great winds that come, that drive the ships of the brother of Jared across the seas for a year, and the great winds that drove the people away from the Tower of Babel, and the great famines that come after that. We see the great famines talked about with not only at the time of Abraham, but we see the famines talked about for his grandchildren, the children of Israel, even much later. And the 10 plagues that we see with Moses, it's during this time that the great volcanoes of the Mediterranean are erupting. It's during the same time when the earth is in commotion. And so we should expect similar things, but it says in Scripture about the last days that the earthquake will be one that's never been seen before. So continuing on in verses 16 and 7, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him that sitteth upon the throne and the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand, that every man's heart will begin to fail him. We read in Isaiah 24, it's talking about this very same event. Fear and the pit and the snare are upon thee, O inhabitants of the earth. And it shall come to pass that he who fleeth from the noise of the fear shall fall into the pit, and he that cometh out of the midst of the pit shall be taken in the snare. For the windows from upon high are open, and the fountains of earth do shake. The earth is utterly broken down. The earth is clean, dissolved. The earth is moved exceedingly. So we see this that Isaiah is even talking about. As he continues on, the earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard, shall be removed like a cottage, and the transgression thereof shall be heavy upon it, and it shall fall and not rise again. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall punish the hosts of the high ones that are on high, and the kings of the earth upon the earth. And they shall be gathered together as prisoners are gathered in the pit, and shall be shut up in prison, and after many days they shall be visited. And the moon, here we're coming back to the same events that are happening there in chapter 12 of Revelation. And the moon shall be confounded, and the sun ashamed, when the Lord of hosts shall reign in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem before his ancients gloriously. Isaiah 34 continues to talk about it. Come near, ye nations, to hear, and hearken, ye people. Let the earth hear, and all that is therein, the world and all things that come forth of it. For the indignation of the Lord is upon all nations, and his fury upon their armies. He hath utterly destroyed them, and hath delivered them to slaughter. Their slain also shall be cast out. Their stings shall come up out of the carcasses of the mountains and be melted with their blood. And this may be connected with what's sometimes called, or is called in the book of Revelation, the supper of the great God. In verse 4 it says of Isaiah 34, and all the hosts of heaven shall be dissolved. The heavens shall be rolled together as a scroll, and their hosts shall fall down as the leaf falleth from the vine, and as a falling fig from the tree. And my sword shall be bathed in heaven, and it'll come down upon the world, Idumea, and upon the people of my curse to judgment. So things are going to happen. The heavens and the earth are going to be in commotion. In Joel chapter 2, we read, and this is where people most quote the sun, moon, and stars. It says in verse 10, the earth shall quake before them, the heavens shall tremble, the sun and the moon shall be dark, and the stars withdraw their shining. The Lord goes on in verses 30 and 31, I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and pillars, fire and pillars of smoke. And the sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes. So this is going to happen before Christ come. And the sun and the moon shall be darkened, and the stars shall withdraw their shining, as we read there in Joel 3, verse 15. So these events are talked about and have been prophesied, and prophecy is more sure than even history is. D&C 29 we read, but behold, I say unto you that before this great day shall come, before the coming of Christ, the sun shall be darkened, the moon shall be turned into blood, and the stars shall fall from heaven. And there shall be greater signs in heaven above and in the earth beneath. So things are going to be in commotion. And before the day of the Lord shall come, we read in D&C 45, the sun shall be darkened, the moon turned to blood, and the stars shall fall from heaven. So these events have not happened, that they could be globally recognized by anybody. And so these events, we should expect these events. And they say before Christ comes, these things are going to happen. You have the signs in heaven and the signs on earth. The sign on the earth is the great earthquake. The signs in heaven are the sun and the moon and stars that we see these events taking place. D&C 88 says, "For not many days hence the earth shall tremble and reel to and fro as a drunken man." So that's the signs on earth. "And then the sun shall hide his face, and shall refuse to give light, and the moon shall be bathed in blood, and the stars shall become exceedingly angry, and shall cast themselves down as a fig that falleth off a fig tree." So these scriptures, the scriptures are the best commentary on the scriptures. And each of these events that are listed in that little book I put together, and you can download it for free. You don't have to buy it. You can download it for free. It has the other scriptures that pertain to those particular events. Joseph Smith in Matthew 1, there in the inspired version of Matthew, it says in verse 33, "And immediately after the tribulation of those days," it's a tribulation, now this is before the time of Christ, "the sun shall be dark, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven shall be shaken." Isaiah 13, which is dealing with the destruction or the fall of Babylon, he says, "Howl ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand, and shall come as a destruction from the Almighty. It will cause men's hands to be faint, every man's heart shall melt. They'll be afraid, pangs and sorrow shall take hold of them. They'll be in pain as a woman that travaileth. They shall be amazed one at another. Their faces will be as flames. Behold, the day cometh cruel, with wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate, and he shall destroy the sinners out of it." In verse 10, "For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in its going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine." So we're seeing these same things that are talked about in Revelation, talked about in all of our standard works, in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, Matthew 24, even in our Pearl of Great Price. Well, we have the sealing of the 144,000 is number 11, event number 11, out of about 33 or 34. And this we see in chapter 7, verses 1 through 8. And it says there, starting in verse 2, "I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God, and he cried with a loud voice to the four angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, Hurt not the earth." So the destructions are going to come, but he says, "Hurt not the earth, neither the sea nor the trees, until we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads." And I heard the number of them that were sealed were 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. Well, always the question is, who are these, and when is this going to happen, and for what reason is it going to happen? We know that many are sealed. Many have received the ordinances, not only of the gospel, but of exaltation of the temple. But this is a particular group and a particular event, it seems. Now, even following these particular verses in chapter 7 of Revelation, it talks about seeing a great number of hosts that were saved. But these 144,000 seem to be for a particular reason and at a particular time. And the question was asked Joseph Smith here in D&C 77, "What are we to understand by the sealing of the 144,000 out of all the tribes of Israel, 12,000 out of every tribe?" His answer, or the Lord's answer through Joseph Smith, "We are to understand that those who are sealed are high priests, ordained to the holy order of God to administer the everlasting gospel." So there's the purpose. There's who they are, and there's the purpose. "For they are they who are ordained out of every nation, kindred, tongue, and people, by the angels of whom is given power over the nations of the earth, to bring as many as will come to the church of the firstborn." Now there's some interesting things. Who are those that are sealed? They're high priests, ordained to administer the everlasting gospel. And they're gathered from every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. So they're not coming out of the north. They're coming, the 12 tribes are gathered out from all nations of the earth, as it says in the Book of Mormon. They're not in one particular place. They'll be gathered from all nations of the earth. And it looks like they are to be doing some type of temple work to bring as many as will come to the church of the firstborn. And that's what we see, or that's the temple administers the ordinances of the church of the firstborn. Now, this may be connected to the 24 temple complex in Jackson County. There at the temple site. Joseph Smith said there were 12 temples of the Melchizedek order and 12 temples of the Aaronic order. And it could be that these 12, and I'm saying it could be, that these 12 Melchizedek temples could be doing temple work, both genealogical temple work for the dead, as well as live temple work for those tribes of Israel that are going to be gathered from all nations of the earth. So there's more information out there than we sometimes think. And it could be. I'm not saying that it is connected to those 24 temples, the temple complex in Jackson County, but it very well could be. Well, the seventh seal is opened, which really talks about nature in commotion. This we see in chapter 8, verses 1 through 13, and it continues to go on. But it's all nature in commotion, signs on earth, signs in heaven. And it could be that there might be a connection to the great earthquake and what we see with the sun, moon, and the stars, and the dust that is there. The 7,000 years, we understand, begins with the silence in heaven and the signs in heavens as the angels are sounding their trumpets. The natural disasters continue, which affect 1/3 of the lives of plants and animals and mankind. The natural disasters in this seal seem to be connected to asteroid impacts, or as John calls it, a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea. And he says, and also there fell, and I quote, fell a great star from heaven, unquote. God works with natural disasters to change the hearts of mankind, while Satan uses violence in order to do the same. Damnation and exaltation each have, as we talked about, a motive, a justification, a method, and a virtue. So we can conclude that these things are happening in order to change mankind. War or violence can be blamed on mankind without the acknowledgement of the interaction of deity. Someone can be blamed for the war, the pushing of the button that causes death and destruction. Those who run into the terrorists who come into the Twin Towers, we could point the finger at somebody. However, a natural disaster cannot be attributed to human action. 3rd Nephi reports that the natural upheavals of nature at the time of the crucifixion of Christ caused the people to repent and turn to God, while Mormon reports that during the Great Wars, the sorrow of the Nephites came because their sorrowing was not under repentance, but because of the goodness of God. But it was rather the sorrowing of the damned, because the Lord would not always suffer them to take happiness in sin, as we read there in Mormon chapter 2. When studying the last days, many focus on the Great War, or talk about a third world war. These wars and rumors of wars are but minor signs of the signs of the times of the last days. The upheavals of nature, the great earthquakes, the sun being darkened, stars falling, and discoloring of the moon are events spoken of in greater numbers. The greatest changes in the spiritual nature of an individual come when that individual has no control and cannot point the finger to any other human being as being the cause. When there's no victim. To this concept, scriptural history testifies. The natural destruction that comes from land and oceanic impacts of asteroids or meteors can be found in the appendix of the book under the cosmic serpent. Now, coming back to D&C 77, verse 12, this is talking about when are these events going to happen? What are we to understand by the sounding of the trumpets mentioned in the 8th chapter of the book of Revelation, which is what we're talking about? We are to understand that as God made the world in 6 days, on the 7th day he finished his work and sanctified it, and also formed man out of the dust of the earth. Even so, in the beginning of the 7,000 years, will the Lord God sanctify the earth and complete the salvation of man, and judge all things and redeem all things, except that which he hath not put into his power, whatever that means. When he shall have sealed all things unto the end of all things, and the sounding of the trumpets of the 7 angels are the preparing and finishing of his work in the beginning of the 7,000 years, preparing of the way before the time of his coming. So the work has to begin after the opening of the 7th seal. And that work is a preparation in preparing not only the world but the people for the second coming of Christ. So Christ comes sometime after, and maybe a long time after the opening of the 7th seal. Again, don't think that each seal is an exact 1,000 years. It might be 800 years, 900 years, 1,000. It could be 1,000 years. It might be 1,200, might be 1,500 years. It's the amount of time required to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. So in Revelation 8, 1 through 3, and when he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in the heaven for the space of half an hour. Now, what does that mean? What is the silence in the heaven for the space of half an hour? Is that half an hour man's time or God's time? I would have an inclination to think it's God's time, which might be 20 years probably. And I saw the seven angels which stood before God, and to them were given seven trumpets. And another angel came and stood by the altar, having a golden censer. There was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And incense always represents the prayers of the saints. We see even in the Temple of Solomon, the altar of incense that stood before the veil that separated the Holy of Holies from the holy place. The altar of incense represented the prayers of the saints. And Revelation 8 continues, and the smoke of the incense, which came with the prayers of the saints, ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. And the angel took the censer, filled it with fire of the altar, and cast it to the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and earthquakes. See, here's your natural disasters. It's not the wars. And the seven angels which had the seven trumpets prepared themselves to sound. The first angel sounded, there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth. And a third part of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. The second angel sounded, and a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and a third part of the sea became blood, which could be that asteroid impact. And it actually mentions 3 asteroid impacts here in these passages, if you want to interpret it that way. In verse 9, and a third part of the creatures which were in the sea had life died, and a third part of the ships were destroyed. And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon a third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. So there's 2 types of impacts, and I've done a lot of study on asteroid impacts. There's oceanic impacts, which you have a 70% chance of having an oceanic impact, and you have land impacts. Oceanic impacts actually turn the water into sulfuric acid, and not only that, but it will cause an impact in the ocean, will cause tidal waves, tsunamis that will destroy, as it says here, almost a third of the people, and a land impact, as it mentions there in verse 9 and in verse 10 there of Revelation 8. It fell upon a third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of water, which would cause disastrous effects when there's no fresh water or good water. Well, here's a little quip I saw. You've got a pretty nasty, says Dr. Moon to the ill earth. He says, you got a pretty nasty case of humans. Take 2 asteroids and call me in the morning. The side effects are rather unpleasant, but they only last a few million years, then you'll be as good as new. Now, this whole concept of the asteroid impact I think is important. I think it plays a big part from the time of Enoch on, and even before that. It may be what's caused plate tectonics to start. It's pretty well proven that it's the asteroid impact that caused the demise of the dinosaurs because of the heavy material or the heavy metals that are found over the dinosaur bones. But there's been 2 men, Victor Klube and Bill Napier, who have written a book called The Cosmic Serpent. And they talk about the effects of a land impact as well as an oceanic impact. And their book is The Cosmic Serpent. And I'm going to talk about that, but in a separate video. And it's going to be under the title of Impact on the YouTube channel, the same one where you get this. It'll be on the YouTube channel coinciding with this. And the information from their book goes hand in hand with the passages in Revelation in 3rd Nephi. To the vapor, the darkness that covers the land, the great earthquakes and destructions. We'll see that in this discussion, in a separate discussion, where I talk about the effects of an oceanic as well as land impact, you'll see that they fit not only right in here with what John is talking about in Revelation, but what we have in 3rd Nephi that Mormon put together for us. Um, the book is called The Cosmic Serpent, written by Victor Klube and Bill Napier. It's a scientific book that discusses asteroid impacts on Earth as well as on other planets. It contains the most detailed and complete information in one volume. It appears that some of the events in the book of Revelation are direct results of impacts of meteors or asteroids, and the destruction of Third Nephi seems to fall into the same type of natural disaster. So look for that. It'll be the title of it will be called Impact. So you can go on and see that. Well, going back to Revelation chapter 8, verses 11 through 13, it says the name of the star was called Wormwood. It's just poison. Wormwood was poison. And the third part of the waters became wormwood. And many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. In other words, the waters were poison. The one that you have, the one on the ocean that kills a third part of everything, and then you have one on the land that begins to do the same thing. The fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars. So as a third part of them was darkened. Well, this could be because of a land impact. You can have a total blockage of sun for a long time. And the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. Verse 13, and I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth by reason of the other voices of the trumpets of the three angels which are yet to sound. There's more to come. It's going to be a terrible time. D&C 29, verses 15 and 16 says, And there shall be weeping and wailing among the hosts of men. There will be a great hailstorm sent forth to destroy the crops of the earth. And you can go on. Don't forget to read section 29 of the Doctrine and Covenants about these things. D&C 45 says there's going to be wars and rumors of wars, and the whole earth shall be in commotion. Men's hearts shall fail them, and they shall say that Christ delayeth is coming till the end of the earth. And the love of men shall wax cold, and iniquity shall abound, just as it was before the flood, as we read in Joseph Smith Matthew. There shall be men standing in that generation that shall not pass until they shall see an overflowing scourge, for a desolation sickness shall cover the land. The pandemic that we've had is nothing compared to the pandemic, the scourge and the sickness that's described in section 29 of the Doctrine and Covenants. D&C 45 continues, But my disciples shall stand in holy places and shall not be moved, but among the wicked men shall lift up their voices and curse God and die. There will be earthquakes in diverse places and many desolations. Yet men will harden their hearts against me, and they'll take up the sword one against another, and they will kill one another. One thing, verse 32 here, my disciples shall stand in holy places. That doesn't mean we need to run to the temple or run to the ward building or the chapel where it might be in order to find sacred space or holy places. Holy places, sacred space is not found, it's created. It's created by dedication. A temple is not sacred until it's dedicated. And so is what that, to me, is what that's saying is our life the way we live our life, if it's righteously, we can stand in holy places no matter where we are at. If we are prepared to die, if we are prepared to meet God, if we are exercising faith unto repentance, we create that. We create by our dedication and our commitment and our faith to Christ and to God. We create that holy place. And so we need to be able to stand in holy places no matter where we are, rather than trying to find that holy place. D&C 45 continues in verse 40 and 41, And they shall see signs and wonders, for they shall be shown forth in the heavens above and in the earth beneath. And they shall behold blood and fire and vapors of smoke. So all of these things come together and seem to be connected. In D&C 49, verse 23, it says, Wherefore be not deceived, but continue in fastness, looking forth for the heavens to be shaken and the earth to tremble and to reel to and fro as a drunken man, and for the valleys to be exalted, and for the mountains to be made low, for the rough places to become smooth, and all this when the angel shall sound his trumpet. These are the ones that are talked about in Revelation. In D&C 84, we read in verses 118 and 19, For with you, saith the Lord Almighty, I will rend their kingdoms. I will not only shake the earth, but the starry heavens shall tremble. For I, the Lord, have put forth my hand to exert the powers of heaven. You cannot see it now, yet a little while, and you will see it. And know that I am, and that I will come and reign with my people. D&C 87, verse 6. And thus with the sword and by bloodshed the inhabitants of the earth shall mourn, and with famine and plague and earthquake and the thunder of heaven. And the fierce and vivid lightning also shall the inhabitants of the earth be made to feel the wrath and indignation and chastening hand of an almighty God, until the consumption decreed hath made a full end of all nations. This is in preparation for that second coming. And section 88 continues, and after your testimony cometh wrath and indignation upon the people, for after your testimony cometh the testimony of earthquakes that shall cause groanings in the midst of her, and men shall fall upon the ground and shall not be able to stand. Section 88, verses 90 and 91, and also cometh the testimony of the voice of thunderings, and the voice of lightnings, the voice of tempest, and the voice of waves of the sea, heaving themselves beyond their bounds, and all things shall be in commotion, and surely men's hearts shall fail them, for fear shall come upon all people. 92 and 93 of section 88 again, and angels shall fly through the midst of heaven, crying with a loud voice, sounding the trump of God, prepare ye, O inhabitants of the earth, for the judgment of our God is come. Behold, and lo, the bridegroom cometh. He's coming after the destructions. Go ye out to meet him, and immediately there shall appear a great sign in heaven, and all people shall see it together. We don't know whether it's going to be dark. It's not dark. It's not light. It's something else that we're going to be able to see. 94 continues in that same section. And another angel shall sound his trump, saying, that great church, the mother of abominations, hath made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, that persecuteth the saints of God, that sheddeth their blood. She who sitteth upon the many waters and upon the islands of the sea. She is the terrors of the earth. She is bound in bundles. Her bands are made strong, and no man can loose them. She's ready to be burned, and he shall sound his trump long and loud, and all nations shall hear it. And there shall be silence in the heaven for the space of half an hour. If you remember this is what opened. This is part of that opened chapter 8 of that seventh seal. There will be silence in the heaven, as well as in D&C 88 that we're talking about. Space for a half an hour, and immediately after shall the curtain of heaven be unfolded as a scroll is unfolded. After it is rolled up, and the face of the Lord shall be unveiled. So the scriptures are the best commentary on the scriptures, and you should use those scriptures to understand scriptures. Everyone has filters and points of view, education and traditions, and the best way to understand events of the last days, or the scriptures themselves, in any topic or subject, is to use the scriptures themselves. So in section 101, verses 10 and 12, it's 10 through 12, it says, I have sworn the decree has gone forth by a former commandment which I have given you, that I would let fall the sword of mine indignation in behalf of my people. Even as I have said, it shall come to pass. Mine indignation is soon to be poured out without measure upon all nations, and this I will do when the cup of their iniquity is full. And in that day all who are found upon the watchtower, in other words, all mine Israel, shall be saved. So there is hope for those who are prepared, but it's not a preparation. It's not a physical preparation. They're not saved in verse 12. The watchtower, it's not being saved in the watchtower because of their year's supply. It's being saved in the watchtower because of their spiritual preparation. And we sometimes spend more energy, time, and money in our physical preparation for the last days than we do our spiritual preparation for the last days. Joseph Smith, Matthew 1:28 through 30 says, They shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. And I speak for mine elect's sake, for nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in divers places. And again, because iniquity shall abound, the love of men shall wax close. But he that shall not be overcome by the wickedness. That's talking about, the context is verse 30. Because of iniquity shall abound, the love of men shall wax cold. But he that shall not be overcome by that wickedness, the same shall be saved. Well, number 13 is wars and plagues. This is chapter 9, verses 1 through 21. There have been as many plagues and wars in history. Yet always plagues and wars take people equally by surprise. We need to be prepared. And the spiritual preparation is always the most important thing. The events of chapter 9 seem to be a continuation of those in chapter 8, as all things are in commotion, both on earth and in heaven, in conjunction with the chapter 8, these events see the death of mankind in great numbers by natural disaster, perhaps wars across the face of the earth. One thing you ought to read is John Taylor's vision of the last days, and it should be in the appendix of the book, I believe. As this chapter speaks of the loss of 1/3 of the men, it may be, and I stress may be, that the events of chapter 8, 9, 15, and 16 are but different descriptions of the same natural disasters and wars that are going on at the same time. And these are those that lead up to the coming of the Savior on the Mount of Olives. Again, the best commentary on the Scriptures is your commentary using the Scriptures, not mine or any other authors. This guide, or the guide that I've prepared, is here to help and to offer other Scriptures that may or may not be related to the book of Revelation. These Scriptures are the key to the events of the last days. Assumptions and traditions leading to interpretations may be the greatest problem to understanding Scripture. It's a scary thing when you think about it, that probably 90% of a person's gospel education after high school, after seminary and high school, 90% of a person's gospel education comes from their gospel doctrine class. And we have to be continually studying, searching for light and truth. In Deuteronomy 28, God promised abundant blessings to his people if they kept his law. But if they failed, they would be afflicted with the plagues of Egypt. In this chapter, the unfaithful Israelites are destroyed by 7 bowls, each representing a different plague of Exodus. The first bowl is the plague of boils. The second and third bowls represent the plague of blood. The fifth bowl is the plague of darkness. The sixth calls to mind the plague of frogs, and the seventh is the plague of hail. In Revelation 16 explains the 7 bowls are the 7 trumpets. And it may be a command in heaven. We might be reading about what's going on in heaven at the same time as what's going on earth. So a command in heaven, and we see or read about the result on earth. This vision is essentially a restatement of Revelation 8 and Revelation 9. Therefore, the consequence of each bowl in this chapter, Revelation 16, matches that of each trumpet in Revelation 8 and 9. The first bowl represents the first trumpet, the second trumpet, and so on. Revelation 16 is basically an elaboration of events previously described in Revelation 8 and Revelation 9. Now, unless you're into the last days, this is not going to make any difference, and it may not be anything you want to care about or even study, but you need to be looking at these things if you want to study these things. I'm not saying that you should or you need to or have to or anything like that. We're finishing the New Testament now with the book of Revelation, and it'll probably be forgotten for another 4 years. The Third World War is something everyone talks about and prepares, yet nature should be the greatest fear. The Book of Mormon has no prophecy of the second coming, yet it is the pattern of the last days. The destruction that came upon the Nephites just before Christ comes is a description of the types and shadows of the destructions that will take place when he comes again. The darkness, the more part of the righteous spared, the Savior's return, the gospel spreading, mass conversions, and the millennial reign of peace and righteousness that we see in 4th Nephi. The falling away because of pride, the influence of Satan as wickedness becomes so rampant that the great and last battle destroys the Nephites. The Book of Mormon is the pattern of the last days, and the Book of Revelation should not be read without keeping in mind and reading the Book of Mormon, 3rd Nephi and 4th Nephi. The best commentary is your commentary that you get and understand from the Scriptures, not mine, not anybody else's. So Revelation 9, and the 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven to the earth. Now that's the 3rd time this is mentioned. And to him was given the great key of the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit, and the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. So only the more righteous, not the righteous, but the more righteous part of the people were spared, as we read in 3rd Nephi. And to them it was given that they should not kill them, but they should be tormented 5 months, that their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man. If you've been ever stung by a scorpion, you realize the pain that that goes along with that, and the torment that goes along with that sting. And in those days shall men seek death, and shall not find it. They shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses prepared to battle, and on their heads were, as it were, crowns like gold, and their faces were as the faces of men, and they had hair as the hair of women. Their teeth were as the teeth of lion that we see, that we talk about. And they had breastplates, as it were, breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots, and many horses running to battle. They had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months. We don't know what John saw or what he was trying to explain with his words and vocabulary and vernacular. We don't know exactly what he saw, but we can make guesses. And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue he hath his name Apollyon. One woe is past, and behold, there comes 2 more woes before hereafter. And the 6th angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar, which is before God, saying to the 6th angel, which had the trumpet, Loose the 4 angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the 4 angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, for to slay a 3rd part of the men. And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the number of them. I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat on them, having breastplates of fire, jacinth and brimstone, and the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions, and out of their mouth issued fire and smoke and brimstone. By these 3 was a 3rd part of the men killed by the fire and the smoke and the brimstone which issued out of their mouth. For their power is in their mouth, and their tails, for their tails are like unto serpents, and had heads with them they do hurt. And the rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues yet repented not of the works in their hands. It's like in 3rd Nephi, that they should not worship devils and idols of gold and silver and brass and stone and wood, which neither can see nor hear nor walk. So Revelation 9, verse 21 says, Neither repented they of their murders, nor of their sorceries, nor of their fornications, nor of their thefts. So, like in the Book of Mormon, it says, they sorrowed not because of the sorrow of their wickedness, but because they could not sin with their safety. And this is kind of what it's saying in Revelation chapter 9 also. And so in verse 13, D&C 7, when are the things to be accomplished in the 9th chapter of Revelation? They are to be accomplished after the opening of the 7th seal, before the coming of Christ. 63 of the Doctrine and Covenants reads, verse 33, Sworn in my wrath and decreed wars upon the face of the earth, and the wicked shall slay the wicked, and fear shall come upon every man. Plagues shall go forth, and they shall not be taken from the earth until I have completed my work, which shall be cut short in righteousness. Well, number 14 is the patience of the saints. This is in chapter 14, verses 12 through 13. And we read here, the Lord promises the faithful that all will be well for them in life or in death. The Doctrine and Covenants teaches that death to the righteous is sweet. And it shall come to pass that those who die in me shall not taste of death, for it shall be sweet unto them, and that they die not in me. Woe unto them, for their death is bitter, as we read in D&C 42. The second coming is when we die, when we have to stand before the judgment bar of God, where all must return and report. All the food storage in the world, the guns and the ammunition mean nothing if we are not prepared spiritually to meet our Savior. This life is but a small moment in the context of eternity. 70 years is nothing but a very short probationary state for man to prepare to meet God. Reality exists only in the realm of the sacred, in an atemporal existence, an existence without time, the world of the sacred, where the gods reside and rule in the heavens, all of creation, where there is no death. This is the real world. The saints who understand the reality of life after death, can and do have patience in the trials and tribulations of this mortal existence, knowing that a better life awaits them. This is why we have hope in these ordinances. Revelation 14, 12, and 13. In my opinion, this is the whole purpose of the book of Revelation. This is why it was written. And we read in verse 12, Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God in the faith of Jesus. And I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, Write, Blessed are the dead which die in the Lord from henceforth. Yea, saith the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, and their works do follow them. The righteous need not fear. That's what he's saying. And I think that's the message of the book of Revelation. Those who are righteous need not fear. Those who are not may want to worry about some of the things that are there. Again, back to D&C 101. Wherefore fear not, even unto death. For in this world your joy is not filled, but in full. But in me your joy is full. Therefore care not for the body, neither the life of the body, but care for the soul, and for the life of the soul. And seek the face of the Lord always, that in patience ye may possess your souls, and ye shall have eternal life. Well, 14a, the prepared righteous need not fear. The A in these numbers, the A is always dealing with something that's not in the book of Revelation, but is in our other scripture. The righteous need not fear because they have been active in the gospel. They, like the publican, are justified by the exercise of faith unto repentance. The second coming can be said that it is when we die, and the only way to be prepared for the supreme sacrifice of death is by personal repentance, exercising faith unto repentance, as Amulek says in Alma 34. The Lord made the statement in the inspired version of Matthew 24. And what I say unto one, I say unto all men, watch, therefore, you know not at what hour your Lord doth come, so our preparation is required. But know this, if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to have been broken up, but would have been ready. Therefore, be ye also ready, for in such an hour as you think not, the Son of Man cometh. That's what he's saying. We need to be prepared because we don't know when he's coming. Spiritually prepared. All of the year's supply will do you no good if you're not spiritually prepared, and everyone is going to die. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give him meat in due season? Blessed is the servant, whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. And verily I say unto you, he shall make him ruler over all his goods. So we need to be prepared. The righteous need not fear, for the faithful prepare by repentance. For blessed is that servant, whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing, exercising faith to repentance. There's one battleground, one prize, two opposing forces that we've talked about, and that you see in the book of Revelation. The battleground is the mind and the heart, the spiritual mind and heart, the spirituality of the individual. That's the battleground. The two forces are God and Satan, or the establishment of Zion and Babylon. And our points of view that come from the mind and heart are choosing one or the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. You're either for me or against me, says Christ. There are only two churches, the church of the Lamb of God and the church of the devil. Elijah asked the questions, how long can you halt between two opinions? We have to make a choice. The battleground is the mind and heart, the spirit. The two forces are God and Satan. We know who's going to win the battle. We know what the score is going to be. And the prize is the eternal spirit. And we have to make those decisions. And this is our agency. We know the battleground is there. We know what the forces are. And we know who we are. And we have to make that choice. 1 Nephi 22, it says, for behold, the righteous shall not perish, for the time surely must come that all they who fight against Zion shall be cut off. The righteous need not fear, for they are those who shall not be confounded, but it is the kingdom of the devil which shall be built up among the children of men, which kingdom is established among them which are in the flesh. And all the nations that fight against Zion and that distress her shall be as a dream of a night vision. Yea, it shall be unto them even as unto a hungry man which dreameth, and behold, he eateth, and he waketh, his soul is empty, or like unto a thirsty man that dreams that he drinketh, but he awaketh, and he is faint. And his soul hath appetite, even so shall the multitude of all nations that fight against Mount Zion. That's the appetite of the wicked. You think you are going to be satisfied, but you are not. 2 Nephi 27 says, for behold, all ye that doeth iniquity, stay yourselves and wonder, for ye shall cry out and cry. Yea, ye shall be drunken, but not with wine. Ye shall stagger, but not with strong drink. For behold, the Lord hath poured out upon you the spirit of a deep sleep, for you have closed your eyes and have rejected the prophets, and your rulers and the seers hath he covered because of your iniquity. Again, he's talking about our spirituality and the choices that we have made to either follow God. The Doctrine and Covenants 45, and it shall come to pass that he that feareth me shall be looking forth for the great day of the Lord to come, even for the signs of the coming of the Son of Man. And so we talk about the last days in the book of Revelation. So you want to know more about the asteroid impacts and the events, it'll be a short little video that describes from Klub and Napier's book, The Cosmic Serpent, of those things. So anyway, enjoy. The best preparation for the last days is preparing spiritually for the last days, not the amount of year supply or what you have in your year supply. There's no way to have canned righteousness or powdered faith. That has to be made, and you have to have that with you, and that's not something you put in your year supply. Anyway, remember that the church is true no matter what I say, and my interpretation and the way I look at things, the way I interpret things from the scriptures, doesn't mean that somebody else is going to interpret that the same way. So you make your choices. Use the scriptures because they are the best commentary on your scriptures.